the conference on climate change and its impact on Africa was actually specifically designed in this way to address the issue of climate change and its impact to Africa as a key factor that continued to create serious problems in Africa, from food insecurity, water scarcity, proliferation of diseases, biodiversity extinction, flooding, erosion, and many other issues. It is important for Africa environmental-wise as we pursued this high level of global concern with respect to Africa, with respect to climate change, which of course is a global issue as a whole, to give it the attention that it needs. So today brings together experts in the area of climate change and environmental issue to address the concern and to find out how best we can work together to at least curb the disaster that is being caused by climate change to Africa as a result. Today, we should have had a remark from the Senator of the state of Maryland, Senator Chris Van Hollen, but because of the holiday, we couldn't get the remarks that he had promised to send us. But the staff have expressed regret that he were not able to send it to us, but they have it FedEx Express to us. Hopefully it can be read tomorrow. Africa environmental-wise been in existence for over 15 years now. We have had similar conferences on a different thematic category. And this one happened to be the fourth one specifically to address the concern as I've earlier expressed. To all of our presenters that are present and those to come in tomorrow, we want to thank you for accepting our invitation to present on this very critical issue of environmental concern and for allowing us your time to join us. And I want to say to everyone that we'll have a good deliberation. I specifically want to thank our Soft Climate Change 2030, co-founded by Dr. David Blockstein, that have helped us last minute of time when we couldn't no longer have the occasion at Morgan State University because of the recent shooting. And so we have to quickly transition to have it virtually. And he has been very helpful to Africa Environmental Watch. In conclusion, I want to thank Africa Environmental Watch staff, the board of directors, the staff, especially Michelle and Howard and General Kofa, for all their hard work and all the rest of you that have made this occasion a successful one, or rightfully so for making Africa Environmental Watch a proud organization. With that being said, thank you very much, and I wish you a best interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kofa. Thank you. And once again, I want to say welcome to everyone. Thanks for welcome, Dr. David Blockstein. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, and we appreciate you being here. At this time, we were actually supposed to have Senator Chris Van Hollen stepping in, but because we don't have him presently, we will move to our next agenda, which is our keynote speaker. So at this time, we will allow, once again, Dr. Kofa to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Blockstein.
Thank you very much. Again, it is my pleasure. I have an impeccable resume, so to speak, a bio of Dr. David Blockstein. But I'm not going to use his bio that I got. But I would rather share it with everybody on our website to read it. But this is what I want to say about Dr. Blockstein. I want you to know before I even get started that he had been initiated into the Liberian tradition from Cape Mount. I mean, not from Cape Mount, from Lofa. And his traditional name, as you see him, he already got on an African attire that is symbolic and manifested into the tradition that I'm about to talk about, that he is no longer a white man, he is an African man. And the reason why Dr. Blockstein was gone and given that name because of his tireless effort he has made, not only to Africa Environmental Watch, but specifically to Liberia and other African countries. Throughout the work of Africa Environmental Watch, perhaps for almost 15 years now, Dr. Blockstein has been with Africa Environmental Watch, giving the support. He was responsible for the third international conference that was held that brought in 14 members of the staff of EPA to the US. He was very instrumental at that time. He was with the National Science Environment. I'm sorry, Dr. Blockstein, if I'm wrongly pronouncing it, just correct me on that. And since that time, he has been helping the environmental cause for not only in the global sphere, but also in Africa. He knows the history of the EPA of Liberia. And through that conference, there were a lot of tangible results that derived from it, from his effort. There were almost 10 scholarships given by the University of District of Columbia. There was an agreement that should have taken place with respect to U.S. Trade Office to build a headquarters for the Environmental Protection Agency for Liberia. And the list goes on. And personally for me, he has never wavered. Even if I called him last minute of the time, he would practically abandon everything that he has to accommodate and to make sure this is successful. The conference today that would have commenced, Dr. Blockstein was very instrumental. He used his organization, which is co-funded, the Soft Climate 2030 that you will see in his presentation, to actually spread the news about this conference, which on behalf of Africa Environmental Watch, we deeply appreciate and welcome, especially his staff that have been instrumental in sharing this. There's a whole lot to say about this man. And it's so much to be proud of him for. And this was also the reason why he was selected to be honored tomorrow. And Africa Environmental Watch will not resist to honor him as many times as we can. Because what he is doing for Africa Environmental Watch and for Africa as a whole, there is no matching of any monetary value to it, because we cannot afford to pay him for what he's always done for us and continue to do. But from our hearts, we just want to thank him very much. Like I said, his resume is huge. If I start reading it now, we might end up in the next 2 hours. But he would agree with me that I want to address it in a more passionate way, which I have done. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with all ado, I present to you our keynote speaker, Dr. David Blockstein.
Thank you very, very much, Brother Morris, for your extremely kind and generous introduction. And it is really one of the honors of my life to be a Lofa man and to be a Liberian brother with you and the others. It's a great honor to be working with Africa Environmental Watch and to be with each of you today. So I thank you for this great honor to be able to speak with you today. So my keynote address, Global Climate Crisis and Hope in Africa. I'm going to talk about, present some of the science about the climate emergency that we are experiencing. I'm going to talk about some of the issues and impacts with respect to Africa. I'm going to present hopeful examples of young people and others, especially in Africa, that are working to educate their fellow country people and others about the needs for action and adaptation on climate change. And then I'm going to conclude talking about the worldwide teach-in on climate and justice that I will invite each of you to participate into. So, whoops. So I want to begin by dedicating my talk today to Beth Palam, who passed away just a few weeks ago through a partnership that we had. We got to know Paula, as she was known, the director of Paula Mercy Foundation Children's Home in Kenya. We're honored to have some of her staff and friends with us today. Excuse me. Paula was a teacher, and even after she became unable to walk and to live the rest of her life in the wheelchair, she dedicated her effort to children and to create a home for them. And despite all of the immediate things that she had going on, she also welcomed our representative in Kenya, Gilbert Natawana-Kiwa, and I apologize, Gilbert, to talk about climate change with the school and became a partner with us because Paula recognized that the impacts of climate change are the greatest on the children and disadvantaged people. So I'm going to just begin with a little bit of hope to show just a start of a video clip of a climate change walk that was held in Paula's honor just a week or so ago.
This is Paula Mercy Foundation in Kenya, locally found in a place called Odhero village. We are ready to fight against climate change, and I've decided today we are going for a walk to sensitize people, the local people in the village, and they should know how climate change is bad even unto us, the way it has affected us. So I'm ready to walk even using a wheelchair, if only to sensitize how climate change is much affecting. Welcome.
I am very, very interested in seeing how Paula Mercy Foundation is taking action in the forms of fighting climate change. And Paula Mercy Foundation, I see that is amazing in Kenya, and I am so glad to see this kind of initiative in fighting this global issue as a climate change. And remember, the climate change is a global issue. Remember, the future of our world depends on how we are taking action in fighting this crisis, disaster, this crisis, despair.
So, sorry, I have to. We are, Gilbert, in his words, has shared the perspective that I want to present here. And I'm going to just switch off for a second and go back to my screen here. In a moment, excuse me. I have to go back. But so that's an example just of the kind of action that is taking place in Africa, with people, just regular, ordinary people who are being involved in the climate solutions and presenting what they believe and sharing it with other people. The issues that we have are very serious. We are now at a case in the planet where it really is becoming an existential issue for us. That in 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change set a goal for the world to, basically a warning that we had 12 years till 2030 to get our act together to reverse climate change. And they pointed out the consequences of whether we can keep the average global temperature at or below 1.5 degrees centigrade. And I should point out that this is a picture, a poster contest from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. So, being a scientist, I'm going to start with the data. So, globally, this past September was the warmest September since since records have been kept. And you can see just how much warmer it was in September than an average. September was an uneven spread around the world, but you can see that most of the world was significantly warm from where we had been previously. This is part of a trend. If you look at this graph, that you can see that over time, every month, almost every year or every set of years, that the temperature keeps getting warmer. And in fact, September was 1.8 degrees centigrade over average. So if you want to know what 1.5 degrees C is like, you can look at September. You can say, well, maybe that was kind of nice here. You know, it was a little warm and, pleasant to be outside. But the consequences are quite large. Our influence as human beings is unprecedented in at least the last 2,000 years. The rate of warming is changing so fast that it has not happened like this. And you can see just how quickly the changes have taken place since the Industrial Revolution. So we're now much warmer than at any time in 2,000 years. And we're probably going to be saying that every year for the foreseeable future. So we're now globally, we're already at 1.1 degrees centigrade. Seven of the warmest years of modern time have been since 2015. So for those of you who do Fahrenheit, it's about 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer on average. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at Africa, same thing is going on there, that a very rapid rise at the variation changes a little bit from year to year, but the trend of climate warming is unmistakable. And it's not just the warming per se, but the consequences, and the other factors. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide being the principal heat warming and heat trapping gas, is the highest in at least 2 million years. I can't conceive of really what 2 million years is. But one of the consequences is that the sea level is rising the fastest that at least in 2,000 years, that, or in 3,000 years, the Arctic sea ice that provides the thermal regulator for the planet is at the lowest level in at least 1,000 years. The retreat of glaciers is unprecedented in at least 2,000 years. So these are major, major trends that we, of all people, are living through at this time. What about in Africa? The temperature is rising in the past 3 decades, about 0.3 degrees centigrade per decade. So that's almost 1 full degree. That's slightly above the global average. So Africa is warming a little bit faster, especially in North Africa. One of the consequences of global warming is rainfall changes in rain patterns. You get heavy rains in some cases, you get no rains in other places. The Horn of Africa, as I'll talk about in a little bit, faced its worst drought in 40 years, 5 consecutive failed rainfall seasons. And in Somalia alone, almost 1.2 million people have been displaced because of the drought. Sea level rise in Africa is about similar to what's going on globally, a little bit higher on the Red Sea and along the Western Indian Ocean. And in terms of the contributions that the average person in Africa is responsible for about 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide per person, which is less than a quarter of the global average. And so the UN's Africa Policy Climate Center is projecting that the loss and damage cost to Africa will be between 290 billion US dollars and 440 billion US dollars over the next several decades. And one consequence of all of this is increased conflict as the changing rainfall patterns and drought and other factors and changes in the natural resource base are creating conflict. So Africa is suffering disproportionately, and that's why one of the reasons why this conference is so important, that the temperature rise is accelerating, the extreme weather is worsening food insecurity that already exists, human displacement, and conflict. Productivity of agriculture is falling. The finance from the global community for adaptation is insufficient by far. The loss and damages are rising, and early warnings of climate disaster need to reach out to everybody. This is from a new report, State of Climate in Africa 2022, by the World Meteorological Organization, that was just released in this past September. So more than 110 million people on the continent are already directly affected by weather and climate and other related hazards in 2022. More than 8.5 billion US dollars in economic damages on a continent that cannot afford anything like that. Here are just a few of the images ranging from snowfall in Libya to sandstorms to floods to drought and human displacement and the major drought in the Horn of Africa. So in some places, people are suffering from drought, and other places, people are suffering from flooding. The distributions and impacts of climate change are much variable. The cause of this, as I think we all know, is increased fossil fuel burning, emissions of carbon dioxide, and other greenhouse gases. You can see that we're still, at this point, we're increasing about 1% per year, which is better, frankly, than it was in the 2000s, but it still is not what we need to do. Over the past 110 years, the global emissions have increased from 7 to 37 billion tons. So that's more than 5 times of increase. And in just the past 30 years, emissions have increased more than 30%. So we are not tackling this beast in the way that we need to. The United Nations recently released a study showing that the world is not on track to meet this goal of 1.5 degrees C. And 1.5, there's nothing special about that. It's just that there was a hope that maybe we could get to that point. But for the most part, we're largely failing, and the consequences are going to be even worse. So we need to be rapidly cutting our emissions. So let's look at emissions, and let's look at the global picture. So here in this little blue box, this is Africa. 4.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide, 3% of the global emissions. And the big box in here is South Africa, and then Egypt below that. And so you can see that most of Africa basically contributes nothing to climate change. Yet in this super rich country where I am situated, our emissions have been a quarter of the historical total, yet our population is a little bit more than 4% of the world population. So clearly, we Americans are living way above our means and are largely responsible historically for the problem, along with Europe and more recently China and to some extent India. So this is a matter of justice. The ethical impacts of climate change are very clear and very strong. Africa currently has about 1.46 billion people, and over 85 million people are in danger of being displaced. Yet the average, as I said, the average carbon emissions are about a ton per person compared to the global average of 4.69 tons annually. So Africa and the African people are the victims, and that's why we're talking about this as an issue of justice. So given all of that grim information that I've just presented, how do we keep ourselves from being paralyzed and just despairing that there's nothing we can do? How do we engage collectively in this great work of climate repair? And as I'm going to be presenting over the next few minutes, we have great examples in Africa about changing from climate despair to climate repair. So to ask the question is in a blog post by my partner and colleague, Eben Goodstein from Bard College, is it too late to stop climate change? Well, the answer is yes, because just the way that the atmosphere works, that the change will continue. But very importantly, everything we do, positive or negative, makes a difference. And so literally 1/10 of a degree is either going to be costing lives or saving lives. So we need to be, for the sake of everybody, we need to be doing all we can do. So let's think about the biggest threat to our future. And I'm going to pause for a second and let you think about that question and put it in the chat, put what your answers are. What do you think is the biggest threat to our future? And I'll give you just a little moment to think about that and to answer if you want. Well, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to proceed. In our view, the biggest threat to our future is thinking that someone else will lead. Because we all need to provide that leadership. And as I say, there's great leadership coming from Africa. Just 2 months ago, Africa had a Africa Climate Summit, Africa Climate Week. The leaders of African nations met in Nairobi and made a declaration on climate change, a call to action. There was a concurrent youth climate assembly also in Nairobi, and they made a declaration. And basically what they said, their common position is that in this climate change process, no country should ever have to choose between development aspirations and climate change. It's not a question of does Africa stay as an impoverished continent? No, that led by the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, there's a better pathway, a pathway to sustainable development. And in many cases, Africa is leading the way. One of the privileges that I've had over the past few years is to get to know some of the young leaders, and most of them are young, um, in Africa, the self-formed NGOs that are doing great work. And so what I want to do is to highlight the work of just a few of these, and there are many, many more. But so the Africa Environmental Network is one. Paul Lodry may be with us today. I'm not sure if he is or not, the founder of that group. But they're working on nature-based solutions that are being implemented in the Cameroon where they are based. They are doing other activities. They're doing trainings. They're working on the issue of nitrogen, and often unrecognized greenhouse gas, and they are restoring habitats such as mangroves. So that's one example of a group. In the project that I've been working on for the past 5 years, the Solve Climate by 2030 project, for the past 2 years, we've organized what we call the Worldwide Teach-In on Climate and Justice, taking place at the end of March. And you can see on this map, this shows the teach-ins that we had in 2022. And you can see that outside of the United States, that Africa actually had the most climate teach-ins of anybody else in the world. A lot of that was facilitated by funding that we received from the Lever for Change program, which is affiliated with the MacArthur Foundation. So I'm going to just show you some of the examples that this is 2022, 23 was similar, 300 to 350 teach-ins, more than 60 countries around the world, directly reaching 50,000 participants and probably many more. So in Africa, we also, our partner on the grant is the Waterloo Institute of Sustainable Energy at the University of Waterloo in Toronto. We are supported, we being Bard College, where I am employed, and we're supported also by the Open Society University Network. So one of our African partners, the African Network of Young Leaders for Peace and Sustainable Development, organized both an online regional conference. There's a ubiquitous Zoom screen. This was in 2022. And then also they did more than a dozen local teach-in events. And so here are just examples of the different kinds of climate teach-ins that were done in 2022 and 2023 involving our our African partners. So what I want to do now is to, this, by the way, is a sustainable fashion show, if you're wondering what this picture is doing here. So I want to share now a 4-minute video that highlights the work of our African partners. Not sure why I went there. Let me try that again. Here we go. Sorry, I'm going to just back this up for a second.
Hello, my name is David Bumzina from Cameroon. I'm the CEO and founder of Green Africa Hope Organization, and we are based in Marwa, in the Fano region of Cameroon. So this year we have organized some events during the worldwide teaching on climate change and justice. We have organized 14 events on climate change solutions and justice in the Far North region, Cameroon, and we have mobilized 455 pupils. So our activities were in colleges, in primary schools, in university, and in our communities. And particularly, we were in Marwa town, we were in Salak, and also in Zamai, where we worked with women. The best outcome of our teachings was that all our participants from primary school till university and also our community members, especially women, have learned about climate change and its consequences, and also how to mitigate, how to find some solutions of some indigenous knowledge.
With the swift grant to Bard College and University of Waterloo, we were able to reach more than 300 people through a virtual regional teach-in event and more than 1,000 people through in-person national teach-in event in 21 African countries. African Network of Young Leaders for Peace and Sustainable Development would like to thank all the funders and our partners. In fact, the organization of African teach-in event triggered a lot of hope among participants. A climate justice community has been set up. We believe that there is still time to act for our future. And for the upcoming events, we would like to organize a well-structured program that will be implemented in all African countries with the support of Bard College and University of Waterloo and all the partners. That will mobilize all the layers of the society and will focus both on education, feasible and visual climate solutions. This will help to continue education through the worldwide teach-in to action and projects, as there are many young leaders, members of the climate justice community, engaged in the teach-in that would like to take their education to the next level.
Hello, my name is Joanlo Michael, Programs Coordinator at the International Support Network for African Development, Iceland, Africa. Within the worldwide teaching on climate and justice, Iceland, Africa organized teaching events in about 13 secondary schools across 5 African countries, namely Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, and Cameroon. Each of these schools chose different topic areas on climate change to discuss at their events. And these events include panel sessions, breakout sessions, music, poetry presentations, cultural dance presentations, display of arts depicting climate change, and so on. Across all 13 schools, one major outcome stood out. Before the event, Iceland Africa hosted teachers from all 13 schools in an information session on the modalities of the teaching events, the purpose and expected activities. Teachers were encouraged to let the students take charge of conversations at their events while they only provide guidance. This is in line with Iceland Africa's commitment to learner-centered and co-creation approach for active learning. While the approach seemed novel to most of the schools, it was strange and almost impossible for them to achieve. However, during the events, the students were absolutely impressive at expressing their thoughts on climate change through the various activities they carried out. We also received feedback from teachers who expressed their gratitude for organizing the events at their schools. On the question of how would we make it more successful, I'm delighted to inform you that leveraging on the impact of the teaching events, we have established Eco Heroes Clubs, a student environmental clubs in 10 out of the 13 schools with the aim of empowering youth with action competence to develop their capacity and long-term commitment to sustainability for everyday life, career engagement, or voluntary service as environmentalists. This also led to working with Kwara State government in Nigeria, where 5 of the schools are located. We will be delighted to collaborate on how to further extend the initiatives to other schools in other countries.
So there's a lot to be hopeful from our African partners, looking at our African partners. Where we want to go and where we invite you to go is that now we are expanding from a one-day teach-in to what we're calling Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week. Will take place at the beginning of April, the first week of April, to begin Earth Month. Our theory of change is that there are tens of thousands of climate concerned educators who would like to be doing something. And that by working through these educators around the world, that we can engage hundreds and thousands of students working on climate in their lives ahead as professionals and in their communities. So I'm going to show one more video that introduces this concept, and then I'm going to wrap up, and then we can have some conversation. So, oops. Go back to the video here. The ubiquitous ads.
Chemistry, psychology.
Oops, sorry, let me go back to the beginning here.
Where are you emotionally on climate change? 1 is I never think about. 10 is paralyzing anxiety, can't sleep at night, don't want to have kids because their world will be to this topic.
The Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week is about helping people move from climate despair and disengagement to a mindset of climate repair. This is the education that changes the future. So Climate Week is for everyone. It's for students, faculty, and staff from all subjects, like artists and psychologists, scientists and business majors, students of music, literature, economics, international affairs, healthcare and engineering, you name it.
Join tens of thousands of people around the world in growing climate education, the first week of April, 2024. You're not alone. People on your campus are really worried about climate change. If you step up, others will join you. At your school, you can make climate an event. This means solutions and justice events on your campus. Art, theater, panel discussions, films, faith meetings, music, games, fairs, and displays. Check out our website for examples from all over the world. Engage your whole school.
On top of your events, you can also help to make climate a class. This means encouraging climate-concerned teachers from all subjects, art, history, chemistry, psychology, all subjects, to spend at least half an hour talking about how climate change solutions and justice are relevant to their field of study, how artists, historians, chemists, and mathematicians are all thinking about climate change. We have step-by-step guides on our website to help you make this happen.
Last summer was the hottest in history. Massive fires, heat waves, floods everywhere. We have to stop it from getting hotter every year. You can help organize Climate and Justice Education Week at your school. The biggest threat to our future? Thinking that someone else will lead, that someone else will stop the climate crisis. Now, not next month, not next year. We all need to step up. Join us.
So I'm going to stop at this point and but stop with an invitation to join us in this great effort to educate the world about climate change, about climate solutions and climate justice, to change the trajectory that we are facing in Africa and in other parts of the world. We've seen the real world consequences of the actions that are mostly taking place in the Western countries like the US. And we've seen examples of the hope that is coming from Africa. And so I'm delighted to be initiating this conference of Africa Environmental Watch, the 2023 conference, and I look forward to any questions or comments, and thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Dr. Blockstein. We'll open up the floor to the audience.